Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Look, if you're architecting large-scale apps, managing cloud infra, or steering enterprise tech strategy, you already know the score. The cloud landscape in 2026, it is definitely not your standard hosting competition anymore. It's a multi-front war, and it's being defined almost entirely by the explosive rise of agentic AI. Today, we are going to dissect Google Cloud Platform's incredibly aggressive ascent. We'll dive right into the stack and see exactly how GCP is re-architecting everything, from custom silicon all the way up to their enterprise sales strategy to take on AWS and Azure.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the market reality, then drop down into the architectural battlegrounds across silicon, compute, and data. After that, we'll unpack the go-to-market economics, take a look inside GCP's leadership matrix, and wrap up with their forward priorities and existential threats.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the market reality, accelerating past the legacy giants.
When we look at the hyperscaler landscape in Q1 2026, it is absolutely crucial to separate absolute size from current momentum, because they are two very different metrics. AWS is still the massive elephant in the room by absolute size, sure, but look at this stark contrast in momentum. GCP is pulling a staggering 63% year-over-year revenue growth. I mean, growing at that speed on an $80 billion run rate, that is basically unheard of. This acceleration is being driven entirely by AI tailwinds. Enterprises are actively, specifically choosing GCP for specialized AI infrastructure. Plus, GCP has finally made that leap from a loss leader to a massive profit center, printing $6.6 billion in operating income in Q1 alone.
And that momentum, it translates directly into a massive $460 billion contractual backlog. Now, to be fair, a huge chunk of this is heavily padded by foundational AI firms like Anthropic, signing multi-year infrastructure deals. But think about how this shapes the future of the industry. These long-term, multi-billion-dollar commitments mean AI infrastructure is fundamentally shifting the financial gravity of the entire cloud war.
Moving right along to Section 2, Architectural Battlegrounds. We're going down a click to silicon, compute, and data. To really understand how GCP goes toe-to-toe against the sheer breadth of AWS and the corporate ubiquity of Azure, we have to move layer by layer through the technical stack, and that starts at the foundation, custom silicon. This is no longer just a game of buying NVIDIA GPUs. Hyperscalers are designing their own chips to control their destinies and their costs. Google is already on its 8th generation of tensor processing units, and they've actually split their strategy. They have the TPU-8T, which is optimized for massive-scale model training, and then the TPU-8i, which packs massive on-chip SRAM specifically for low-latency inference. By contrast, AWS is pushing Trainium 3, leaning hard on their Neuron SDK to make it super developer-friendly for porting PyTorch code, and Azure's Maya 100? It's highly vertically integrated, but it's really built primarily to run Microsoft's own internal workloads like Copilot, rather than being a playground for the public.
Okay, so stepping up to serverless compute. The concurrency model right here is often the absolute deal breaker for architects. AWS Lambda operates strictly on a one-to-one model. One request equals one micro VM. If 1,000 requests hit your app all at once, Lambda literally tries to boot 1,000 instances, which leads to that infamous cold start latency we all hate. Google Cloud Run, however, treats serverless as containers. A single Cloud Run container can handle up to 1,000 concurrent requests. For web traffic and high-volume APIs, this practically eliminates cold starts altogether and dramatically slashes operational costs. It's a massive advantage.
Up at the data layer, we see another huge philosophical split. Google BigQuery is undeniably GCP's crown jewel. It is truly serverless with near zero database administration. You stream petabytes of data, write standard SQL, and Google dynamically spins up thousands of compute nodes for the exact seconds your query takes. It's brilliant. But because you're charged by the amount of data scanned, CFOs often get totally spooked by unpredictable bill shock. In contrast, AWS Redshift leans on a mature, predictable cluster-based model. It takes way more manual tuning, but hey, the costs are fixed. And Microsoft Fabric, they take a unified SaaS approach, tying data seamlessly right into that sticky Office 365 ecosystem.
Which brings us to Section 3, Go-to-Market Economics. Let's look at the psychology of C-suite procurement.
Leaving the engineering console and stepping onto the sales floor, we see completely different philosophies as these giants try to close billion-dollar enterprise contracts. Azure uses what we call the defensive blanket. They pitch the C-suite top-down, offering massive discounts on Azure if the company bundles it with their existing Office 365 and Windows Server renewals. It is a completely frictionless procurement advantage.
GCP doesn't have that desktop ubiquity, so they sell Innovation Alpha. They target developers and chief data officers bottom up, making the case that cutting-edge tools like Vertex AI and BigQuery will let them build complex apps way faster and with fewer engineers than the competition.
AWS, meanwhile, locks in the market using purely structural economics. Their Enterprise Discount Program, or EDP, demands incredibly strict multi-year spending commitments. If an enterprise misses its target spend, they're literally billed for the unspent deficit. It is a massive punishment. On top of that, their Migration Acceleration Program heavily subsidizes the cost of moving away from on-prem data centers. These structural lock-ins make it financially irrational for an enterprise to suddenly switch to GCP mid-migration, even if they know GCP has better AI chips.
But here is GCP's brilliant countermove, the marketplace loophole. Let's say a CIO committed to spending $5 million on GCP, but only actually used $4 million on infrastructure. Well, GCP allows them to buy third-party tools, like Datadog or MongoDB, through the Google Cloud Marketplace, and that purchase counts toward their GCP commitment. Even better, Google compensates its sales reps neutrally for these ISV deals. This alignment completely incentivizes reps to act as true advisors. They help clients burn down their commits without forcing them to endure new, agonizing legal reviews for third-party software. It's a win-win.
All right, Section 4, GCP Leadership and Matrix, how they're organizing for the agentic era.
Let's zoom back inside Google for a second to see how they actually organize their immense talent pool to deliver on all these agentic AI promises. The key takeaway here is that Google Cloud operates on a tight matrix structure. On the technical side, you have horizontal commanders, Brad Calder owning core infra, like the Google Kubernetes engine, a partner Romani directing Cloud AI and Vertex, and Sailesh Krishnamurthy leading data analytics. But instead of these top-tier engineers fighting each other for accounts, they are perfectly paired with verticalized commercial sales teams who own the customer relationship. So a healthcare client gets a unified commercial pitch, but it's backed directly by deep, specialized product engineering.
To sustain that wild 63% growth we talked about earlier, Alphabet has to be ruthless about where it allocates capital. Look at this. An estimated 40% of their engineering resources are dedicated purely to cloud AI and custom silicon. We are talking about optimizing compilers for TPUs, deep integration pipelines with Google DeepMind, and completely re-architecting liquid cooling for hyperdense data center racks. Another 35% goes to the core systems, keeping the lights on, and the final 25% is allocated to enterprise security and workspace SaaS.
Finally, Section 5, Forward Priorities and Threats, Navigating Existential Risks.
Now, despite their massive growth, GCP faces some severe existential risks from both inside and outside the traditional cloud ecosystem. To really grasp the threat, we have to talk about data gravity. This is the absolute ultimate rule of enterprise architecture. Compute always moves to where the data lives, never the other way around. Why? Because in 2026, the storage format war is over. Open source Apache Iceberg won. Storage is completely commoditized. So the real battle now is over who provides the compute in the agentic layer directly on top of that data.
And this reveals a massive underlying war. SaaS stalwarts like Databricks and Snowflake are out there telling enterprises, hey, keep your data in our lakehouses and just build your AI agents right here. They want to bring the model to the data, because if the data already lives in Snowflake, CISOs and CFOs are not going to want to extract it and pay massive networking egress fees just to move it over to GCP's Vertex AI. This is a very real existential threat to hyperscalers who have traditionally relied on bringing your data to their models.
So, to survive this, GCP has laid out some incredibly clear 3-year forward priorities. First, they absolutely must kill the Google graveyard stigma. They're doing this by offering 5-year enterprise long-term support guarantees for their AI APIs. That builds trust. Second, they are heavily pushing Spanner Omni, actually deploying their own database technology natively into AWS and Azure regions. And finally, to counter the Snowflake threat, they are building zero-ETL agentic data networks using Managed Model Context Protocol servers. This protocol standardizes how AI models connect to data sources, which basically allows GCP agents to reach directly into external data lakes securely, analyzing data right there in place without triggering those massive egress fees.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. Will data gravity pull AI out of the hyperscaler cloud entirely? GCP clearly has the most advanced silicon and agentic AI platforms on the market right now. But if platforms like Databricks and Snowflake successfully become the undisputed center of enterprise data gravity, they just might steal the AI crown right off Google's head. The next 3 years are going to determine if Google's architectural elegance can actually overcome the sheer structural inertia of enterprise data. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.